Hey, hello there, and welcome to Talking with Tony. If you're tuning in for the first time, and chances you are, this is Talking with Tony, season 14, the premiere episode, episode number one on YouTube. I want to thank previous carriers for having us, but our relationships as far as New Link and WoW have now been completed, and we're moving on. So this is something brand new for many of you. For those of you who have had WoW in the past and are now seeking us here, you have found us, and I couldn't kick off the new Talking with Tony on YouTube without having the best guest that I've ever had on Talking with Tony. That's Mr. Fred Blatchford. Fred is in Tampa, Florida. I am Tony Jones in Auburn, Alabama, and our producer director, Jake Barton, is in Noonan, Georgia. And I could also not do this without Jake. So, first of all, before we begin, I want to thank both of those gentlemen, Jake and Fred. And Fred, over the years, people who have watched the show and seen you guest appear also think of you as a co-host, but they also have labeled you the world's most interesting man. So it's great to be joined by the world's most interesting man.
Well, I don't know about the world, but we'll go with the United States.
Fred, we generally talk sports, and we will certainly talk sports here. Fred is our chief correspondent for all sports, actually, and he's an awesome prognosticator, soothsayer. But I think it's very important that we also mention the folks out in Hawaii, in that Maui area. Tara and I went on our honeymoon to Maui, and she was telling me the places that we went are just, they're not even there anymore. I know that you've gone over a couple of times. I know these folks are really hurting. The death toll, unfortunately, is just going to rise as they have more and more opportunities to search. Right now, they can't even search for a lot of the territory. But I know you have some thoughts, and I know that you can even share a story of one of your trips over there if you want to.
Well, first of all, it's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been, as you guys know. If you guys went there on your honeymoon, it's an unbelievable place. The other thing too, though, is probably going to make this more difficult is it's not near anything. So getting any sort of recovery supplies, kind of stuff that they need to do whatever just is not, something that, when you think about Florida and gets hit by a hurricane, within 24 hours, there are power trucks coming from any state within, 150 miles, 200 miles driving towards Florida. There's just not a whole lot that they can do from a recovery standpoint there. So unfortunately, like you said, I think the next few weeks, the story is only going to get worse, and it's going to be really sad. But it's a beautiful part of the world, and it's devastating because there was no place for those to go. I saw a couple of videos where people were actually standing in the water because they didn't have any place to go. I mean, can you imagine being somewhere that the only place to go was into the ocean? And then Bob, I guess, until somebody came pick you up.
And then you need to be cognizant of things like sharks and all the possibility if you're going there to, which brings me to one of my points. You might be saying, as you watch at home, why is Fred the most interesting man in the world? There's a lot of different reasons. He was such a vital tool for Talking with Tony during the COVID times, being an employee of Johnson & Johnson. He's an Iron Man. How often do you get to see an Iron Man and get to talk to an Iron Man? But he is certainly that. He's an Iron Man. He's also an accomplished deep sea diver, a world traveler, teaches people scuba diving. On that thought, because you're sort of a shark expert, if you will, you've looked into the eyes of sharks. Coming off Shark Week a couple of weeks ago and all, what were your thoughts of this year's Shark Week, Fred?
Well, you and I talked a little bit about it is that I like the ones that they actually are doing serious stuff with sharks as opposed to the celebrity ones. I don't need to see Shaq in a whatever size wetsuit that whatever size he wears or some of the stuff like that. The one that got me the most, there was one of that they actually filmed in a spot that I dive, which is in Jupiter, Florida, where they actually did, I think it was Blood in the Water in Florida. It was interesting to be watching TV on some of the places that I actually dive and have done many dives. They didn't show the one famous shark that lives there, which is Miss Snooty, of which I have run into her a couple of times on my trips there. But it's always fascinating to watch that stuff. They are obviously unbelievably dangerous. They're on the top of the apex as this relates to the food chain, but it's very interesting to see them in their environment. Now, obviously, when I do it, depending on the makeup of the group, meaning the shark group, not the diver group, your antenna, rises and lowers depending on what kind of sharks are around us. When you're talking about reef sharks or lemon sharks and stuff like that, your antenna is not that high. If the bulls show up, your antenna gets a little bit more upright. If the tigers show up, your whole antenna is all the way up. And then just the last trip, some hammerhead showed up, and that completely changes the dynamic of the time in there. And so it's fascinating to be in there. It was fascinating to watch that week of TV. But like I said, I like the serious stuff, the celebrity stuff they can do without.
Have you ever noticed, Fred, like a shark take off, and the reason they took off was because another shark was coming, whether it be a bull shark or a hammerhead, but it gets the attention of the other sharks, and you say, okay, well, it's maybe not time to get out of here, but it's time to take things serious now.
Oh, there's no doubt that there's a hierarchy in the shark world too. I mean, the bigger and the badder ones that show up, the rest of them move out of the way and let them get what they want. So, the tigers will get folks' attention. They will move anything out of the way. The bulls were a little bit more. They would circle around us a few times. They were a little bit more cautious. They didn't come storming in. I tell folks the lemon sharks that we've done in those famous pictures that I've posted on social media, it sort of equates to being in your living room with a bunch of golden retriever puppies. I mean, they literally were running into us and jumping over us or swimming by us because they were trying to get to the bait box, which was we were using to draw them in. So it's a surreal experience. I mean, you don't really think about being around 10 or 12 or 15 sharks at one time and worrying about whether you're going to survive it or not. I never felt on the last trip where the most showed up, I never felt like I was in danger. Now, when the bulls showed up and they circled around the inner circle, you had one eye to see where they were. The tiger, the one that we ran into 2 trips back, actually was going in a different direction. I rolled off the boat. He was down there going one way, and I went in the other direction. And then the hammerheads, they quickly showed up. We stopped feeding, and when we stopped feeding, they left, which is what we wanted them to do. You don't want to have if they get fresh meat in their mouth, they won't leave, and we wanted them to leave. We got some good, cool pictures of them, and then they left.
One of the things I think that you hold dearest to you, since you do go and dive, is some of the shark teeth that you've been able to discover and find. I mean, some of these shark teeth you've been able to date back 3 million years, Fred.
Yeah, no kidding. That was sort of an odd way that I got interested in that. There is a place about an hour and a half south of here, Venice, Florida, that for a lot of reasons I could spend an hour talking about why they're there. But apparently 3.6 million years ago, megalodon sharks hung off the beach of Venice, Florida. There is a thing called a dugong that live there as well. And that's sort of like a manatee supersized on steroids. And that was the food source. And so for millions of years, those things hung out around that area. And as I've said before in previous shows, a shark will kick out about 20,000 teeth in its lifetime. And so you put millions of years and probably millions of sharks and millions of teeth. Over all those times, they have fallen out of the shark's mouth in and around this part of the world and around the state. And over time, they have, through a lot of reasons, migrated to just off the shore of Venice, anywhere from 2 to 3 miles out is usually where we are. It's not very deep water. We're about 35 foot down. On the Gulf side, you don't have these big giant ledge drop offs where it goes from 30 feet to out of sight. The Gulf, it's a very gradual decline, and it takes you a good ways to get out to any sort of depth. So it's not a very deep dive. But it is the proverbial looking for a needle in a haystack. I mean, literally, you're looking for something about 4 inches this big in the vast ocean. There are things that we teach people to look for that might indicate that there could be teeth in that area of fossils and so other things that we talk about in the presentation that we do before we take people out. But it's been a kind of a fun thing. It's a little bit addictive. I found one Saturday, which was a little over 4 inches, 4 1/8. So if you believe the science, that was roughly a 40-foot shark 3.6 million years ago. which would be about the size of a school bus. So for those of your listeners who have young kids who get picked up every morning to go to school, that's what a megalodon shark would look like 3.6 million years ago. People ask me, have you ever seen one? And I've told them if we see one down there, we've got a whole different story to cover. We'll have a whole show on Talking with Tony about me running into a megalodon shark.
I think that not only Talking with Tony, but I think Discovery Channel is going to watch you ASAP.
I will be on next year's Shark Week if I have a picture of me with a megalodon shark.
Yes. Hey, I've gotten to know Ralph Collier, who appears on some of the episodes of Discovery Channel very well. He'll want to get in touch with you. Well,
he would definitely want to be in there. Yes, but it's a cool. I mean, people find those teeth in the city of Venice. If they build a Home Depot and they're using bulldozers to move earth around, they find them there. So for whatever reason, millions of years ago, these big things hung out around there. I guess it was about a month ago, I got a call from the guy that owns the charter, and they found a mastodon, which is a prehistoric elephant, basically, and they found its tusk. Mm-hmm. It was probably 8 feet long, and they asked if I would come down as a rescue diver. I know how to do the rescue stuff of it, and see if we could excavate it. And we went down on a Monday, and we tried to excavate it, but when we started to try to pick it up, it just kind of fell apart. But the guy that found it got a couple of chunks, maybe a foot and a half long, that was pure ivy. I mean, it was all ivy. I have a couple little shreds of it. That was kind of cool. So the pictures that we took before we tried to pull it out were the best ones. He actually reached out to the archaeology department of University of Florida, and they said if you try to pick it up, it'll fall apart, and it did. So it was cool to see. It was obviously, you could see it laying in the bottom with its curve, and you could see where the part that stuck in the elephant's head, and it was really cool to see. It was a shame we couldn't get it up, but it was cool to see.
I appreciate you sharing the story. I hadn't heard that story. You're currently you've done Ironman. You're currently training for another. First of all, what's that like to hear him say, "Fred Blatchford, you are an Iron Man"? And secondly, how does this weather? We have a thunderstorm every single day. You in the Tampa area for sure do. How does that affect your training as well? Does that dictate what you can do as far as bike or running on that day?
Question about what it was like when I came across the finish line. I mean, obviously, it's a very unique, rare experience. Less than 1% of the human population has ever done one. Especially somebody as dumb as I am at my age to have finally decided.
And what you froze up just you froze up just for a second. What was that at advanced age? I'm not going to say at an old age, but you were basically past. You're a little bit older than me, and I'm past midlife. So you were past midlife. So what goes on in that head and says, "All right, Fred, let's do an Ironman"?
Well, a couple of people got involved in the whole process. A couple of people that had done it before. And one guy, Bob Burke, told me the process, which on the surface sounds like a really good idea until you're about 6 months into the 9 months of training, and you're tired of the damn process. They also tell you that somebody else told me that, 3 things are going to happen during the day, and 2 of them are bad. He said, 1, something's going to happen. In my case, it was I had a bike malfunction about 85 miles into the ride of 112. And then he said the last 6 miles of the run are the worst miles of your life. And both of those happened. I had a bike malfunction. We got it fixed, and I got back on the road. And then at the 20-mile mark, I had 6 more miles to go. And those last 6 miles were just, a living hell. And well, relatively speaking, I mean, obviously not compared to some of what people are dealing with in Maui or anything like that. But it was hard. And I can remember I came around the corner, and as I turned, if you've ever seen the end of an Ironman, they have a red carpet, and you kind of turned into this one. And I can remember stopping, and it's about 100 yards long, I guess, maybe so. And just stopped, and I just kind of took it all in. The only disappointment about that year that I did it was COVID year, so it wasn't lined with thousands of crazy lunatics screaming and hollering as you came down the thing. But they do call your name, and they did say, Fred Blatchford, you are an Ironman. And it was pretty cool. I can remember going through the finish line, and there was a young girl there, and she said, "Can you take off your timing chip?" And obviously, after 15 hours, 52 minutes, and 59 seconds, there wasn't a whole lot that I could do. And I kind of looked, and she says, "You can sit down in that chair if you want." And I said, "If I sit down in that chair, I will
Yeah.
not get back up." And so she thankfully kindly reached down and undid my timing chip. But it's one of those things that it's really hard, no doubt. And it's a culture that those folks get into. Those folks they live a different lifestyle. And the good news is it was in the COVID year, so a lot of the distractions that I would have had with work and all that sort of stuff I didn't really have, so I could kind of train whenever I wanted to. As I now prepare again, I don't know how people do it with a full-time job and family and a wife and kids, or a husband and kids and stuff like that. I don't know how they do it, because it's a lot of hours. I did 9,000 miles of training, which is obviously bike and run, and that doesn't count the swim. I don't know how much that was, but it consumes your life. It's a hard thing to do, but obviously it's a unique experience. Periodically I'll wear Ironman stuff, and it gets people's attention when they see that you've done one and all that kind of stuff. And it's a small family, and people have said stuff to me in the airports, and I've said stuff to people in the airports too when they see you wearing something that says Ironman on it.
Something that hit my mind too when you said it wasn't like it was hell, but it wasn't like what people are dealing with in Maui. You and I have actually talked about that PGA Tour golf tournament in Maui on this show before. Just thinking about that and what the
Yeah.
future of that event could potentially hold. Just really brings things down to show us what the significance, and this is life and death, and that's golf. But you are our head correspondent, certainly our head golf correspondent. Although it was Tony Jones who picked Brooks Koepka to win the Masters, and he finished second, and then came back, and I took him in the PGA, and he won. So I get credit for that. But what I love, Fred, about the show is you and other guests have always provided so many winning predictions before the seasons have started, and it's a little unfair for me to ask you today, I guess, about a potential national champion in college football. So I'll stick it. And you see me wearing my Buckeyes. Marvin Harrison Jr., the greatest football player in the country right now. But I think it's fair enough that I can ask you, Lucas Glover, what's going on with him now? He's found his game after all these years. He's won back-to-back events. Is he now the guy to beat, Fred, as far as the FedEx Cup goes? Or who do you see lifting the trophy?
Well, it goes to show you that they talk about you drive for, show and putt for dough. He won the U.S. Open, 10 or 12 years ago. So the guy has had golf game. It's not like he came out of nowhere and won 2 tournaments in a row. He could play, but he literally it was painful to watch him putt. And apparently around the 1st of June, he switched to a long putter. And he said it took him about 30 days to get, accustomed to it. But, that son of a gun hadn't missed a putt since. And you think about a putt per 18 holes, 4 or 5 foot, 6 foot. You miss 1 or 2 of those. That's the difference between first and second place, let alone 50th and 51st place, or making the cut and not making the cut. And so if he started making 1 more putt around, that's 4 shots a tournament. That's the difference between 10th and first place. And so whatever he found in that long putter that he must have had when he was younger makes a difference. I mean, I saw something this morning about, do you put him on the Ryder Cup team?
Yeah, I think so, since the Ryder Cup is just around the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how you leave him off at this point.
What do you think happens to the other live guys, the Patrick Reeds and the Dustin Johnsons? I mean, Koepka is going to be on the team. He's got the points just from those 2 events. And what do you think this whole joining of the tour, has that smoothed those things over, or not so much? How do you what's your feel there?
Well, it sure appears that obviously they made the big splash where they had, the guy from Saudi Arabia and the commissioner, Jay Monahan on TV, and they talked about all the love and all this kind of stuff. And as people started to peel back the onion, it sure appears that this framework that they talked about of how this was going to work it doesn't feel like there was a lot of frame to the framework. There was a lot of stuff that's unanswered. And it feels like, and I don't know whether this is going to happen or not, but as they continue to dig and put this stuff together, I wouldn't be shocked if at some point in time there isn't a framework and it falls apart. Wouldn't shock me.
Okay.
So I don't know. I think going into 24, I don't think anything's going to be different. I think those guys are going to be playing over there, and the PGA guys are going to be playing wherever they play. But I wouldn't be overly surprised if this thing falls apart. I don't have any inside information. I'm just saying, when attorneys start getting involved, I mean, the fact that they just had another players meeting the beginning of last week, and very few people showed up, and the ones that showed up said there wasn't a lot of detail. I mean, it's been a couple of months. I mean, what are they working on?
Yeah, you're right. And we don't, still a lot of details that we don't know. You're right. We know a little bit more than, but there's still a lot that we don't know. I would be remiss if I didn't, though, talk a little college football with you and brag on your alma mater, Auburn University. Auburn's very important to you. You've given back. You're on the alumni board. Big backer of the Googe Center, and so much more. I mean, in the College of Business, and I can go on and on and on with what you've done. Bo Bikes, Bama with Bo Jackson. You and Bo are buddies, and but I could really go on. I guess I want to ask you right now: are you excited? There's a little momentum going on in Auburn right now with the recruiting. Are you surprised? And is your excitement maybe meter level a little bit higher now for the upcoming season than it was, say, a month ago?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it absolutely. One, I think he has done more quicker than people thought was possible. Two, the recruits that he's been getting and the energy he's got around it is very exciting. But let's don't lose sight of the fact that none of those kids are here this fall. Two, they'll be freshmen next fall.
Right.
So you're really looking at probably 3 seasons out before they're sophomores and probably contributing as a group at a high, high level. But with that being said, I do think that they'll be better. I think they're going to be better coached. There's clearly a lot more energy around that, around the campus and around the team. I do think that they're going to win games. I think they'll probably get bowl eligible. I think, they could win 7 games, maybe 8 if, some things go in the right direction, stuff like that. But I think people need to be excited that he's done a good job. I think he's already spent more hours and more energy recruiting than Harsin did in his first 2 years here. And it seems to be having an impact. He's getting some big name players. I think NIL is having some say in this whole process too, that, kids are looking at that as a part of it. If the tie goes to the runner and the runner's got a bigger bag, guess who the kid's going to go to? So that's having an impact on it too. But I still think we're a couple of years away from really being back in the top, 10 or 15 schools in the country. I think the preseason ranking had them 39th. That may be a little bit pessimistic, but I don't think they're going to be a top, 15 team this year, maybe next year, but 2 years from now, when they're back to that schedule where Georgia, Alabama's at home, all that kind of stuff, that could be the year. So that would be what,
2 years. 2 years for this coming year. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. I'm going to tell you this. This won't be, for a lot of our viewers, this won't be very popular because we're deep in SEC country. But I think the 2 best teams in the country are Michigan and Ohio State. I think that Ohio State's wide receiver and running back group is sensational. I think their defense has improved. I have questions about the offensive line and whether or not they will be able to bring a quarterback along the way they were able to do with Justin Fields, the way they were able to do with C.J. Stroud. I don't know if Devin Brown is that guy. I don't know if Kyle McCord is that guy. We're going to wait and see. Michigan, I really like their roster all the way through. They may not look as dynamic as Ohio State with some of those playmakers, although the running backs are sensational. And I like their schedule. And Ohio State has to go to Ann Arbor this year. But it's those 2 teams. I could see a deal where maybe there's 2 SEC teams. Don't count out LSU. I really like them. There could be 2 SEC teams, and there could be 2 Big Ten teams. It's like now the Big 32 or whatever they are now. So it's going to be an interesting football season.
I think you're right. I think you could see 2 and 2. I mean, those 2 conferences are clearly going to be the preeminent conferences in the country very, very soon. So yeah, it would surprise me that two from each conference end up in the playoffs in January. Wouldn't surprise me at all. No, and Ohio State and Michigan are clearly just about every year the cream of the crop of that conference anyway. And then you're probably going to look at Georgia and Alabama here. So it wouldn't surprise. Can you imagine Ohio State, Michigan, Georgia, Alabama in the semifinals? Well,
Mhm.
wow.
And well, there was that year in 2006 where Florida got in the national championship game against the winner of Ohio State and Michigan, and that winner was Ohio State. But the Michigan people, because Auburn had beat Florida during the regular season, Michigan people were like, "No, we deserve a rematch in the bowl game." They didn't believe Florida deserved to be in there. Well, Florida deserved to be in there because Florida beat Ohio State 41-14 that night in the national championship game. Chris Leak and Ted, I think they had Chris
Yeah.
Leak and Tim Tebow at
Chris
that
Leak.
time.
God,
Hey,
I've heard that guy's name forever. Chris Leak. Wow.
I've got to ask you about Oreo, the mascot, our official mascot of Talking with Tony. Is Oreo around to make an appearance here on the initial YouTube episode by any chance before we go? I know we're running out a little bit of time. Jake, our producer, is looking a little nervous.
She's doing the same. She's doing the thing she's best at. Sleeping.
Okay, so sleep. There's nothing wrong. Folks, you haven't seen Oreo here on the YouTube. You did if you were a WoW subscriber and you were previously able to see Talking with Tony. But this is season 14, episode number 1, our first on YouTube. And Oreo will be on camera eventually. Maybe not today, but one of the favorite things, and she is a great dog that creates very little problems and she doesn't bark. But one of my favorite things to do is when Fred might come home, he might say, "Oreo, whatever you've been doing, stop doing it." And you're totally joking with her because she has really been such a treasure and such a gift to you.
And I say that more than one time a day.
That's awesome.
Whatever she's doing, she needs to stop doing it.
How is your golf game going? Because you're a very accomplished golfer as well.
When I started doing the Ironman, I stopped playing a little bit, so I haven't played a ton of golf in the last couple of years. I played in the Bow Bikes Bama thing, was the last tournament I played in. And right now, with the heat index of 113, I have zero desire to play golf right now.
Even though that ball
I would rather wrestle an alligator.
That ball will carry very well in that humidity.
It will. I'm not arguing that.
Yeah.
But no, I don't need to ride 30 miles in 113 and then go play golf in 113. That's just a bad combination.
Let's give the University of Michigan a little more equal time, since I am wearing the Marvin Harrison jersey, and I'll be wearing Abuka, the other wide receiver, in episode number 2 with John Perkison. You got to be around Desmond Howard a good bit during Bow Bikes Bama, and I think you told me that he was really, really great to be around.
Yeah, he was. I have a bunch of idiot Ohio State fan buddies, and I came up to him and I said, I hate to be that guy. I said, but I got a bunch of idiot Ohio State buddies. Do you mind if I get a picture taken with you? And he said, sure. And so I took a picture and I texted out to probably 6 or 8 guys who are, lifelong Ohio State graduates or fans and stuff like that. And within, basically a nanosecond, they all responded to me saying that he was overrated. I'm trying to get the sun out of there. He's overrated. He never was that good of a player. I mean, he did win a Super Bowl and he won the Heisman, and I think he was the MVP in the Super Bowl, wasn't he? So overrated may have been a little bit harsh just because he went to Michigan.
And he beat the Buckeyes with a big punt return for a touchdown, and then he gave the Heisman pose right into the to the camera.
He was a lot smaller than I thought he would, but back then, he played 20 years ago. He was a lot smaller than I thought he would be. Not that I had any aspiration, thinking that it would be anything bigger, but you could clearly tell that guy's asset was speed and not necessarily he was going to run over you.
Did you enjoy playing with him or Lance Armstrong more, playing golf with those guys?
Lance was a lot more fun. Super, super competitive. You can see where he gets his drive before you get into any conversation around whether he was using, doping or anything like that. But super, super, super competitive, and a good guy. He was a lot of fun to play with. He really was. He wanted to know about diving and all this kind of stuff too. He's got a vodka company now that he runs out of Aspen, Colorado, and folks talk to him about that. But no, he was a lot more fun. Not that anything was wrong with Desmond Howard, but he was a lot more fun.
I got about 2 more minutes left. I want you to talk just for a little bit about a recent trip over to Europe where you rode bicycling and all. You even got in a competitive soccer match that was going over there against 2 of the powers in Portugal. But that was a great trip for you.
It was. I mean, Portugal is a beautiful place. and obviously, as in all of Europe, I'm assuming soccer's a thing. And I couldn't really tell you what the names were, but it was the red team and the green team. And literally the town of
I think it was Lisbon and Benfica. Benfica has how you say it?
yeah, but Lisbon
FICA?
was one because I was in Lisbon at the time.
Mhm.
They were one of them, and then the other one, and literally the town stopped. So if you were doing anything or going to the restaurant or whatever, you were not going to get any service, no help. I'm assuming you couldn't get an Uber anywhere. It was fascinating to watch. I'm not a soccer guy. I've never been to a soccer match. Don't know anything about soccer other than it's 90 minutes and you hope that somebody scores every once in a while to provide some level of entertainment. But it's a thing over there. It really was. And there was a woman that was at the restaurant, and I'm assuming she was probably in her 80s, and she had her green jersey on and all that sort of stuff. And you would have thought that, and probably to some level it did, their lives depended on it. And it ended up in a tie, which that's the problem with soccer. You can't play 90 minutes in a World Cup kind of a match and walk away and everybody's, shaking hands because they tied. No.
But your team got a late goal to tie it at 2.
Yeah,
So that's
that's
better
right.
than
Yeah,
losing.
no doubt,
Yeah.
no doubt. They did.
So,
Yeah, so it was fascinating to see the whole thing. It really was.
Fred, I really appreciate you joining me here on the initial season 14, episode 1, our initial broadcast over YouTube. Jake and I, the producer, have talked. We think that we're going to do about 5 episodes a month, and we'd like to have you at least twice every 5 times. Are you okay with that? I know you're a busy man.
Yeah, I don't think your viewers want to see me twice a month, but yeah, we'll do it whenever we
Believe
can
me,
make it happen.
believe me, they do. You are the world's most interesting man. I appreciate you coming in today.
Sure, my pleasure.
Folks, that's all the time we have for Talking with Tony, episode 1 of season 14. Tune in. Next episode will be with John Perkison, our film critic and football coach. And I'll be wearing a buka. Today I'm wearing Marvin Harrison. We'll see you next time right here on Talking with Tony.